Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the true scary stories. Story 1. The Living Room Haunting. I had never given much thought to the old painting in my living room. It had been there when I moved in, a seemingly benign portrait of a serene countryside. The soft, pastel hues and the peaceful scenery gave the room a comforting, if somewhat dated, ambience. But lately, something about the painting had changed. At first, it was subtle, an unusual shadow here, a strange glint there, but soon, the changes became impossible to ignore. One evening, as I settled into my armchair with a book, I noticed a figure in the painting that hadn't been there before. It was a small, dark silhouette standing near the edge of the forest depicted in the background. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but the figure remained. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at it, trying to make sense of its sudden appearance. Milo, my ever-faithful German shepherd, growled softly at the painting, his eyes fixed on the shadowy figure. "What's wrong, boy?" I murmured, reaching out to scratch behind his ears. His growl deepened, and he took a cautious step forward, his hackles raised. The unease in my stomach grew. I approached the painting, my heart pounding in my chest. Up close, the figure was even more unsettling. It seemed to shift and flicker, as though caught between this world and another. The serene countryside now felt ominous, the trees casting twisted shadows across the landscape. My fingers trembled as I reached out to touch the canvas. It was cold to the touch, almost freezing, and I jerked my hand back in shock. Determined to remove the painting, I took it down from the wall and placed it in the attic, covering it with an old blanket. Milo watched me the entire time, his eyes never leaving the canvas. "There," I said, more to myself than to him. "That should do it." Feeling a sense of relief, I returned to the living room, hoping the strange figure would haunt me no more. But the next morning, the painting was back in its original place. My heart sank as I stared at it, the figure now closer to the foreground, its features more defined. It was a man, his face twisted in a grotesque expression of pain and fear. Blood stained his clothes, and his eyes seemed to bore into mine, filled with silent screams. Milo barked furiously at the painting, his teeth bared. Panic surged through me. How had it returned? I rushed to the attic, but the space where I had placed the painting was empty. The blanket lay undisturbed, as though nothing had ever been there. My hands shook as I retraced my steps, trying to rationalize the impossible. Determined to end this madness, I took the painting to the basement, sealing it behind a locked door. That night, I barely slept, haunted by nightmares of the man in the painting, his screams echoing in my mind. When morning came, my heart raced as I entered the living room, dreading what I might find. The painting was there, back on the wall. The man's figure was now at the very center, surrounded by scenes of violence and horror. Blood dripped from the canvas, pooling on the floor beneath it. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. This was no ordinary painting. It was a window into something dark and malevolent, something that would not rest until its secrets were revealed. Hey, subscribe for more scary stories. The painting's horrifying transformation left me shaken. Each morning, I would find it back in its place, no matter where I tried to hide or destroy it. The scenes within it grew progressively more violent, depicting acts of unimaginable horror. The once peaceful countryside was now a hellscape of tortured souls and grotesque figures. The man at the center became the focal point of these atrocities, his eyes pleading with me for help. Milo became more agitated with each passing day. He would bark and growl at the painting, his body tense and ready to attack. I could barely keep him away from it, and I was growing more desperate. One night, I decided to seek answers. I searched online for anything that might explain the painting's behavior. After hours of fruitless searching, I stumbled upon a forum dedicated to haunted objects. One post in particular caught my eye. "Beware the painting that changes. It is a portal to the other side, a gateway for the restless dead. To stop its curse, you must uncover its origin and lay the spirits to rest." This was my only lead. The next day, I took a closer look at the painting, searching for any clues about its origin. In the bottom right corner, nearly hidden by the darkening scenes of horror, I found a small, almost illegible signature, H. Blackwood, 1897. With a name and a date, I had a place to start. I spent the next few days digging into historical records and archives. The name H. Blackwood led me to a reclusive artist named Henry Blackwood, who had lived in the area in the late 19th century. His works were known for their unsettling themes and dark imagery. The more I learned about him, the more I realized that his life had been shrouded in mystery and tragedy. Henry Blackwood had been accused of practicing dark rituals and consorting with malevolent spirits. He vanished under mysterious circumstances in 1898, shortly after completing his final work, my painting. The locals believed he had been consumed by the very forces he had sought to control. The stories were chilling, but they provided no clear solution to my predicament. One night, as I pored over my notes, the power went out again. The house plunged into darkness, and Milo started growling at the painting. I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the living room, my heart racing. The beam of light revealed the painting had changed once more. The man was now reaching out of the canvas, his hand extending towards me as if trying to escape. A sudden chill filled the room, and the whispers began. They were faint at first, but grew louder and more distinct. "Help us, free us," they begged. My breath caught in my throat. The voices were coming from the painting, the tortured souls trapped within it. Desperate to end this nightmare, I decided to follow the whispers. They seemed to guide me, leading me to the basement where I had last hidden the painting. In the corner of the room, beneath a loose floorboard, I found an old, weathered book. Its cover was adorned with the same dark symbols that lined the painting. I opened the book, revealing pages filled with Henry Blackwood's frantic writings and illustrations. Among the pages, I found a ritual, a way to break the curse and release the trapped spirits. The instructions were cryptic, but I had no other choice. I gathered the necessary items and prepared for the ritual, hoping it would finally put an end to the horrors. As I stood in front of the painting, the whispers grew louder, more desperate. I began the ritual, chanting the incantations from the book. The room grew colder, and the painting started to glow with an eerie light. The figures within it writhed and twisted, their screams echoing in my mind. Just as I finished the final incantation, the power returned, and the house was filled with a deafening silence. The painting no longer depicted scenes of horror. Instead, it showed the serene countryside once more. The man at the center was gone, and the air felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. For the first time in weeks, Milo was calm. He lay at my feet, his eyes closing in peaceful sleep. I breathed a sigh of relief, hoping that the nightmare was finally over. But as I turned to leave the room, I noticed something chilling, the man's shadow, faint but unmistakable, lingering in the background. The days following the ritual were eerily calm. The painting remained unchanged, depicting the peaceful countryside without any trace of the previous horrors. Milo seemed more relaxed, no longer growling or barking at the walls. For a while, I dared to hope that the nightmare was truly over. But the lingering shadow in the background of the painting never left my mind. One night, as I sat in the living room, I noticed a chill creeping into the air. The temperature dropped rapidly, and the lights flickered. Milo lifted his head, ears perked, and began to growl low in his throat. I looked up at the painting and froze. The shadow was no longer faint, it was darker, more defined, and it seemed to be moving. Panic gripped me as the room grew colder. I grabbed the book I had found in the basement, flipping through its pages for any clues I might have missed. The shadows on the walls seemed to dance, forming shapes and figures that loomed ever closer. Milo barked furiously, his eyes fixed on the painting. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder and more menacing than before. "You failed," they hissed. "He is not free." My hands trembled as I reread the ritual's instructions. Had I done something wrong? The shadows seemed to close in, and I realized with growing horror that I had only completed part of the ritual. There was a final step I had overlooked. In the book, written in almost invisible ink at the bottom of the last page, was a single, chilling sentence: "To seal the curse, you must confront the darkness within." I stared at the words, my heart pounding. What did it mean? How could I confront a shadow, a presence that defied all logic and reality? Determined to end this once and for all, I steeled myself and approached the painting. The shadow seemed to pulse with a life of its own, growing larger and more ominous. Milo barked and growled, but I kept him at a distance, knowing I had to face this alone. With a deep breath, I reached out and touched the canvas. A jolt of electricity shot through me, and I was pulled into the painting. The serene countryside was gone, replaced by a dark, twisted landscape. The trees were gnarled and dead, and the sky was a swirling mass of black clouds. The shadow stood before me, no longer a mere outline but a fully formed figure with glowing red eyes. "You have come," it whispered, its voice echoing all around me. "But you cannot win. This place is mine." Gathering all my courage, I spoke the final incantation from the book, my voice trembling but determined. The shadow recoiled, its form flickering and shifting. "You do not belong here," I shouted, taking a step forward. "You must leave this place and never return." The ground beneath me shook, and the sky darkened further. The shadow lunged, but I held my ground, repeating the incantation over and over. The air crackled with energy, and the shadow let out a deafening roar. The world around me seemed to implode, and I was thrown backward, the darkness swallowing everything. I awoke on the living room floor, the painting hanging on the wall above me. Milo licked my face, whimpering softly. The room was warm, the air filled with the faint scent of burnt ozone. I looked up at the painting and saw that the shadow was gone. The countryside was serene once more, and the figures within it were peaceful. Exhausted, I lay back, breathing a sigh of relief. Milo curled up beside me, finally at ease. The whispers were gone, the shadows banished. I had confronted the darkness and won. Or so I thought. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me, lurking just out of sight. The final words of the incantation echoed in my mind, "You must leave this place and never return." But what if the shadow found a way back? What if it was waiting for the right moment to strike again? Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. Haunting in the Attic. I always found comfort in the old house on Elm Street, with its creaky wooden floors and charming, if somewhat antiquated, architecture. However, one peculiar thing about it had always puzzled me. Max, my usually fearless Doberman, flat out refused to go anywhere near the attic. Whenever I tried to coax him up those narrow stairs, he would growl and bark furiously, digging his claws into the floorboards in defiance. Last night, something changed. As I lay in bed, the sound of scratching echoed from above. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but grew louder and more insistent as the minutes passed. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened, straining to make sense of the noise. Was it a rat? A raccoon? Or something else entirely? Max seemed to sense my unease. He stood at the foot of the attic stairs, his ears pinned back and his hackles raised, emitting a low, continuous growl. "What's wrong, boy?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the scratching. His response was a sharp bark, his eyes fixed on the attic door as if daring whatever was behind it to come out. Summoning my courage, I decided to investigate. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand and slowly ascended the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. The air grew colder as I neared the top, and the scratching grew louder, more frantic. My hand trembled as I reached for the attic door's handle, the flashlight's beam dancing wildly across the wooden panels. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, musty space cluttered with forgotten relics and dusty old furniture. I swept the flashlight around, half expecting to see glowing eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing, just shadows and silence. The scratching had stopped. I took a cautious step forward, my heart in my throat. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish immediately after. There was no response. I explored the attic, moving aside boxes and peering into corners, but found nothing unusual. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed something odd, an old, tattered rug in the center of the floor, slightly askew. Kneeling down, I moved the rug aside and discovered a small, wooden trapdoor. My curiosity piqued. I pried it open, revealing a narrow, steep staircase descending into darkness. The air that wafted up was damp and cold, carrying with it a faint, musty odor. Max, still at the top of the attic stairs, barked furiously, his eyes wide with fear. A chill ran down my spine as I stared into the abyss. What was down there? And why had Max been so terrified of this place? My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I knew I should close the trapdoor and forget I ever saw it, but something compelled me to keep going. I hesitated at the edge of the trapdoor, peering into the darkness below. The staircase seemed to descend endlessly, swallowed by shadows. Max's barking echoed in the attic, a stark reminder that something was profoundly wrong. Taking a deep breath, I stepped onto the first creaky stair, feeling the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. As I descended, the air grew colder and damper, carrying an eerie silence that seemed to absorb all sound. The flashlight flickered again, and I gripped it tighter, praying it wouldn't die on me. Each step felt like a leap into the abyss, the darkness pressing in from all sides. About halfway down, I started hearing them, soft whispers, indistinct and barely audible. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a ghostly chorus that sent shivers down my spine. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The whispers paused for a moment, then resumed, slightly louder, more insistent. Finally, I reached the bottom. The small room I found myself in was nothing like the rest of the house. The walls were lined with old, moldy bricks, and the floor was cold, damp concrete. In the center stood an old, wooden table, covered in dust and cobwebs. On it lay an assortment of objects, a rusted key, a torn photograph, and a small, leather-bound book. I approached the table cautiously, my heart pounding in my ears. Picking up the photograph, I wiped away the dust to reveal the image of a family, a man, a woman, and a young girl, all smiling brightly. There was something unsettling about their eyes, though, something that made me shudder. They seemed to be staring straight at me, their smiles twisted into something sinister. Next, I turned my attention to the book. Its leather cover was cracked and worn, the pages yellowed with age. I opened it, revealing page after page of handwritten notes, diagrams, and strange symbols. As I flipped through the pages, a sense of dread washed over me. The handwriting grew increasingly frantic, the notes more cryptic and disturbing. One passage caught my eye. "They are here. They whisper in the dark, waiting, watching. The key must never be used. It must remain hidden, for their return will bring only death and despair." A sudden noise made me jump, a soft, shuffling sound from behind me. I spun around, the flashlight beam sweeping across the room, but saw nothing. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, filling my head with their eerie, unintelligible murmurs. My pulse raced as I felt a presence, something unseen but undeniably there, watching me. With trembling hands, I grabbed the key from the table and backed away, my eyes darting around the room. The whispers intensified, merging into a cacophony of voices, each one filled with malice and despair. I stumbled up the stairs, desperate to escape, the darkness closing in around me. When I finally burst through the attic door, Max was there, his barking frantic. I slammed the door shut, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Whatever I had disturbed, whatever lay hidden beneath the house, was now awake. And it was coming for me. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and mounting dread. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even during the brightest hours of the day. Max never left my side, his usually playful demeanor replaced by constant vigilance. He would growl at shadows, his eyes always darting to the attic door. One evening, as I sat in the living room trying to make sense of the cryptic notes from the leather-bound book, I heard it again, the scratching. This time, it was louder, more insistent. Max immediately jumped to his feet, his hackles raised as he barked furiously at the ceiling. My heart raced, the key I had found feeling like a lead weight in my pocket. I knew I had to confront whatever was in the attic. With Max close behind, I climbed the stairs, flashlight in hand. The whispers began as soon as I reached the top, more distinct now, filled with a sense of urgency. The attic door creaked open, revealing the trapdoor in the floor. Taking a deep breath, I opened it and descended once more into the dark, musty room below. The objects on the table were exactly as I had left them, but this time, I noticed something new, a faint glow emanating from the walls, pulsing like a heartbeat. The whispers grew louder, forming words that sent chills down my spine. "Free us," they pleaded. "Release us." As I approached the table, the key in my pocket grew warmer. I pulled it out, feeling its strange energy pulsate in my hand. The whispers reached a fever pitch, urging me to use the key, to unlock whatever had been hidden away for so long. My instincts screamed at me to run, but something stronger, a deep, inexplicable compulsion, drove me forward. I noticed a small, rusted lock on the far wall, almost hidden behind a stack of old crates. With trembling hands, I inserted the key into the lock. It turned easily, despite its age, and the wall shifted, revealing a hidden doorway. A cold breeze wafted out, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of decay. Beyond the doorway lay a narrow, dimly lit corridor. The walls were lined with ancient symbols, their meanings lost to time but emanating a palpable sense of dread. Max refused to follow me any further, whimpering at the threshold. "Stay here, boy," I whispered, hoping to calm him. "I'll be back soon." As I ventured deeper into the corridor, the whispers followed, guiding me. The air grew colder, and my breath formed clouds in the dim light. At the end of the passage, I found myself in a small, circular chamber. In the center stood an old, stone pedestal, and atop it, a large, intricately carved box. The box seemed to hum with energy, the symbols on its surface glowing faintly. The whispers became a single voice, clear and commanding, "Open it." My hands shook as I lifted the lid, revealing a dark, swirling void inside. The room seemed to tilt, and I felt myself being pulled toward the darkness. Just as I was about to be consumed, a blinding light filled the chamber, and a deafening roar echoed through the corridor. The force knocked me backward, slamming the box shut. The whispers ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence. Gasping for breath, I scrambled to my feet and fled the chamber, the door slamming shut behind me. When I emerged from the trapdoor, Max was there, barking furiously at the now locked door. My mind raced with questions. What had I almost unleashed? And why did it feel like I had only just begun to unravel the house's dark secrets? The days that followed were filled with an unbearable tension. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. The whispers had stopped, but the oppressive silence was almost worse. Max stayed by my side, his constant vigilance a reminder that the danger was far from over. One night, as I sat in the living room, trying to decipher the last, cryptic notes in the book, the power went out. The sudden darkness was complete, and the house seemed to hold its breath. Max growled low in his throat, his eyes fixed on the attic door. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I knew I had to face whatever was lurking in the shadows once and for all. With a flashlight in hand and Max at my side, I ascended the stairs to the attic. The air was colder than ever, and my breath formed visible puffs in the dim light. The attic door opened with a groan, revealing the trapdoor. I steeled myself, determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Descending into the dark room once more, I noticed something I hadn't before, faint footprints in the dust, leading to the hidden doorway. The whispers had left me with one final command: remember the box. The key in my pocket felt like a burning coal, urging me forward. In the hidden chamber, the stone pedestal stood empty, the box gone. Panic set in as I realized someone, or something, had taken it. The whispers returned, a cacophony of desperate pleas and warnings. "Find it," they urged. "Stop them." Following the footprints, I made my way through the house, the oppressive silence broken only by Max's growls. The trail led me to the basement, a place I had rarely visited. The air was thick with dampness and decay, the walls lined with forgotten relics. In the corner, a faint light flickered. There, in the basement's darkest recess, I found it, the box, open and empty. The realization hit me like a physical blow, whatever had been contained within was now free. A sense of dread washed over me as I turned to leave, but the basement door slammed shut, trapping me in the darkness. The whispers grew louder, forming a single, terrifying voice. "You have failed," it hissed. "Now face the consequences." A cold hand clamped down on my shoulder, and I spun around, the flashlight beam revealing a shadowy figure, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. Max barked furiously, launching himself at the figure. The room filled with a blinding light, and a deafening roar shook the walls. I stumbled backward, feeling the ground give way beneath me. As I fell into the darkness, the last thing I saw was Max, standing defiantly against the shadow. I awoke in my bed, drenched in sweat, the house eerily silent. Max lay beside me, his fur matted with blood. The attic door was closed, the trapdoor sealed. The whispers were gone, replaced by a profound, unsettling quiet. The leather-bound book lay on my nightstand, its pages blank. I knew then that the house's dark secrets had not been fully revealed, that something still lurked in the shadows, waiting. As I sat up, the room grew colder, and a familiar scratching sound echoed from above. The nightmare was far from over. The end. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.